Hey guys!
Hey.
Welcome to W&L Review. Today we are going to be reviewing 3 movies. Back to the Future, Back to the Future Part 2, and Back to the Future Part 3. I'll let my mom start off.
Okay, if you have not seen Back to the Future, then I don't know where you've been. But Back to the Future starts off, and Marty McFly, by he is kind of a not a nerd, but I don't know. He's just kind of a sorry, I didn't mean to boop your nose. He is kind of just a kind of guy. And, him and Doc are friends, and then he goes back to the past, in 1955, to where his parents met and fell in love. And unbeknownst to him, I bonked you in the face. See, I need to keep my hands to myself today, apparently. Unbeknownst to him, he ends up meeting his mom, and his mom ends up accidentally falling in love with him. And it kind of ends up being like this big problem. You need to lay down, sir. You need to lay down, sir. Okay. Anyway, he ends up being kind of a problem because how his mom fell in love with him was because his dad, or his grandpa, hit him with the car. She falls in love with him, with Marty, and that was how his Marty's dad and mom back in the day fell in love. And then they went to the dance and all this, and so things kind of got a little haywire there for a while, and then he got sent back to 1985. Well, because this little bit of a change that happened with Marty's dad and with his mom and with Marty, when Marty goes back to 1985, his dad is now a successful businessman, and him and his wife are madly in love, and they've been married for 50 some years, and they've had a really wonderful marriage and all this, and not 50 years, but anyways, they've been married for a long time. And you think that's the end of the story, but I can't go too far because I only have to go to the first one, because I'm going to give her the baton to tell you. So, go for it.
Back to the Future, like my mom said, it is a really funny family movie. You guys have to watch it. My mom definitely gave you a shortened version because there's so much more to it. And we don't want to give too much away because if you haven't seen it, which I don't know how you haven't seen it, you have to see it. It's so good. All 3 of them are.
Oh.
But you have to see them because they're so funny, and it's just, you never know what, of course when you're first watching it, you never know what's going to happen. There's twists and turns and loops and all these things, and you, like I said, if you haven't watched it, you need to. Where have you been?
Under a rock.
Yeah, it's been out since the 1980s, and it still holds water as a good movie, as a great movie. And I just loved the movie. It's like just enough sci-fi, but not like too much where it's like really cheeseball. It's like, it's well done.
Yes.
And with that being said, I'll let my mom tell you about Back to the Future Part 2.
Back to the Future Part 2. So it starts off with Marty going back to 1985, and 1985 is not quite what they had planned. It's a different 1985 and Back to the Future 2. get to.
Well, first
wait.
they go to
The correct
2015.
2015. Well,
they go to the correct 1985. Then they go to 2015.
Oh, that's right. Okay. So I got a little ahead of myself. Anyway, so they go to 2015 and they see Marty and Jennifer's future, Marty's girlfriend, and it is again an oops because Marty ends up accidentally meeting, what is it? Not Biff, but Griff.
Yeah.
Griff, who is Biff's grandson. And if you don't know the movie, you don't know who Biff is. Biff was the bully of Marty's dad.
In Back to the Future.
In Back to the Future. Griff is his grandson in Back to the Future 2. And Marty inadvertently meets Griff, and then there ends up being this pursuit of, kind of like in the first movie, there's a chase, and Doc had brought them to 2015 because there was a problem with Marty and Jennifer's son, and in this interim of him meeting Griff and all this, that changed Marty's son's future for the better. They end up and they go to the house. They had Jennifer sitting at the side of the road, and these cops pick her up and take her to her address. And all the while they're going, man, she looks really good for her age, you know. Yeah. She looks really good. She looks really young. And they take her, and then she comes to. She wakes up at the house, and she's like in this future, and she's like, what? And then she meets herself in the future. They both pass out, and it's a silly movie, and inadvertently, Marty, while he's in 2015, he gets a sports almanac book, and when he does this, he Doc is like, you can't do that. That's going to change everything. It's going to change the course of history, the course of everything in your life and everything else. And Marty's like, you're kind of being a party pooper, blah 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 blah. And Doc says, get rid of this book. And in the interim, Marty gets rid of the book. He throws it in a trash can. Well, guess who happens to find it? But Biff, the old man. He finds it. He goes back in time and changes his thing. And then so when they go back to 1985, it's not the correct 1985. It's an alternate 1985, and I'm not going to say too much, but I'm going to say that it is definitely, I will say it was, definitely made you think, and I'll let my daughter tell you what she thought of Back to the Future 2.
It was so good. It was just about as good as the first one. It's another really good family movie that you don't have to worry about too much. It's really funny, comical. Like I said, it's something the whole family can enjoy, young, old, and everything in between. So, if you guys haven't watched it, again, where have you been? You gotta watch it. It's good. It's not like one of those sequels where it's absolutely horrible compared to the first one. It stands on its own as well. So, it's just a great movie that you guys need to see. And with that, we'll talk to you guys about Back to the Future Part 3.
Part 3. Okay, so Back to the Future Part 3 starts off with, hold on to your horses and see if you can keep up, okay? Back to the Future 3 starts off where Back to the Future 2 left off. And it is, it's basically at the end of Back to the Future 2, Doc is in the DeLorean and he's trying to get everything taken care of so that he can send Marty back to 1985. And there's a thunderstorm. They've already known there's a thunderstorm because in the other movie, that's how he got back to 1985, was because he hit the clock tower and everything and blah, 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 blah. Well, they've already, the one Marty went back to 1985, but this Marty came back from the future, and so then Doc is in the car, and he's trying to get things all figured out. Well, the DeLorean blows up. It gets struck by lightning, it blows up. So you think, oh, poo, that's the end of the movie. That's, what happened? Well, at the beginning of Back to the Future 3, Marty is standing there and he's just like in shock of what he just saw. The DeLorean was destroyed with Doc inside. And he's beside himself. He just witnessed his friend die. And all of a sudden this car pulls up and now mind you, we're back in 1955. So this car pulls up, and this man comes out, and it's raining, and this guy comes out, and Marty's kind of got this, like suspicious look on his face, like. The guy says, asks him, "Are you Marty McFly?" And he's, "Yeah. I have something for you," and he pulls out of his jacket pocket a letter. And this letter was from Doc, but from 70 years prior. And he said, maybe you can answer a question for me, because we've been sitting on this letter at the Western Union for 70 years. But we were told explicitly that, such and such things happen, that we need to take this letter to this location on this particular day. And so he does, and he says, So Marty reads a letter, and it's from Doc, and it's from 1885. So then you go way back in time, although not quite yet. So then Marty, that's back in 1955, goes back to Doc's house.
To the actual Doc from 1955.
Right. And he goes to his house, and Doc is like, in disbelief. He doesn't know what's going on, doesn't know what to think. And he passes out the first time he sees Marty, because he had taken and sent Marty back to the future. And then here's Marty again, and he's like, wait a minute. Anyway, Marty, tells him everything and says, I came back, you gave me this letter. That's impossible, the Doc says. That's impossible, that couldn't have happened. Well, this is your letter, this is your writing. Finally, the Doc realizes, oh yeah, that is my writing, Mm-hmm. And then they devise a plan to get him to 1885, so that he can get Doc, bring Doc back to 1955, and then bring Marty back to 1985.
And bring Doc back to 1985.
Oh. Okay. Yeah. See, I get confused sometimes. This movie's a little bit all over the place. But he then goes and they take him and they go to the drive-in. And the drive-in on the bottom has a Native Americans on horses, and Marty says, "Well, Doc, if I drive towards the
Native American.
No, if I drive towards the theater thing, I'm going to drive right towards the Indians, the Native American." And Doc says, "Oh, don't worry about it. They won't be there." They won't be there give too much more away without passing the baton to my daughter. I pretty much said a lot, but
Yeah.
anyway.
Well, basically, the rest of the movie goes, Marty gets back to 1885, but he breaks the gas line, so the car has no gas. It still has the ability to travel back in time, or forward in time, or whatever, but it can't drive, and the whole premise is it has to get up to 88 miles per hour. So how's it going to do that if it can't actually drive? So they devise a plan to hijack a train so that it can push the DeLorean, so that the DeLorean can get up to 88 miles per hour, so that Marty and the Doc can get back to 1985. However, what ends up happening is the Doc meets this girl named Clara, and he is Twitter-pated, and clearly, they have a fight later on in the movie. He thinks it's over. She ends up she goes to a train station and gets on a train, and she hears the guys talking about the Doc in the background, because he had gone to the bar the night that he thought that they were done and everything, because he tried to explain that I have to go back to the future, and she is like, you're pulling my leg, you could have just said that you didn't love me and that we're done. And so that's how it ended. And he heard the guys talking about the Doc being in the bar, and she realized that he was telling the truth. And she goes to find him. She eventually gets on the train, gets his attention. He tries to get her so that they can take her back to 1985 as well. Well, what happens is they don't get in the DeLorean in time. They're still on the train. Marty gets back to 1885. 1985. He wakes up his girlfriend, who was sitting on the porch from the second movie where they left her. He brings her back because the DeLorean was destroyed by another oncoming train in 1985 that collided with the DeLorean once Marty got back. So the DeLorean was wrecked.
With the hair of this Chitty Chin Chin, he almost didn't make it.
Yes. And so he's going, there's no way to get the Doc back. And then when he comes back with his girlfriend, they see that the train blocks are coming down to stop traffic from going over the train tracks, but there's no train coming. Then a train appears, and it's the Doc who made a time machine out of a train, and him and Clara are together, and they've had 2 boys, and so he gave him the picture that they had taken from 1885 as like a remember me type of thing, and then he goes, and Marty says, where are you guys going, to the future? And he said, no, we've already been there, and that's the end.
Picture that they took, the picture is of the clock tower.
Well, yeah.
In front of the clock tower, as it's being built.
Yeah, which ties into the whole
movie.
The whole series.
Yeah.
And so, that's the movie. Again, another great movie. It isn't like one of those movies where it's like, oh, it's a sequel or whatever. It's an add-on to the series. It's gonna be crap. No, it's really, really good. So you guys have to watch it. If you haven't seen it, again, where have you been? You have to see this movie. It's so good. It's another family movie. Everyone can enjoy it. And, yeah.
It's one, I would say that any of these 3 movies you can watch separately. You don't have to feel like you have to watch them all in succession. You can watch them separately by themselves and still get enough out of the movie that it makes sense.
It might be a little confusing, though.
Well,
maybe.
It might be, but I still think
if you watch them out of order, it might be confusing.
Well, yeah, but I mean, if you watched it, you could still watch them alone.
Yeah. And
still be entertained.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so I would definitely recommend this movie for anybody. It does have a little bit of language interspersed in every one of the movies. Not overly bad, you know, like nowadays every 2 words is a bad word. So, you know, keep that in mind. If you don't like any movies with any language whatsoever, then probably not watch it. But I would say give it a shot. And I would actually say give all three movies boom, boom, boom. Now, I will say that the last one is what, 2 hours?
Yeah.
The last movie, Back to the Future 3, is like a little over 2 hours. The first one's like an hour and a half, I think, and the second one is about the same.
Yeah.
So, keep that in mind. Uh, they are good movies, and yes, I have them. So they are movies that I personally have in my own collection of movies. They are not ones that I know of any channel right now that where they're available. So, but if you get a chance to watch them, I would recommend it. And anyway, you want to do the close?
I guess I can. So with that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and click that notification bell. Also, huge shout out to Marion, also known here on YouTube as Life Unboxed. Thank you so much for joining our Patreon. If you guys are interested, the link is in the description box. And with that being said, guys, we're going to see you next week. Bye!
Bye!